Hey folks, Josh Stein here, circlingwizardry.com, the School of Circling Wizardry, and here I am again answering another question about circling. And so this is another question that came from the Circling Wizardry Facebook group, and this was about romantic relationships. And the question was something along the lines of, how do I bring circling into my romantic relationships? In particular, if I have a partner um, who isn't familiar with circling, how do I bring it to them in such a way where they might be able to engage with me more on this level of communication? Now, take everything I say with a grain of salt because relationships are not my area of expertise. Um, and I only have so much to say about it. But I think what I have to say is hopefully important. I don't know if it's going to answer your question, but hopefully this is helpful to some people in some way, somewhere. um, so, first, just to answer the question, you can't bring this work to anyone who doesn't want to actually do it. Um, I should backtrack a little. Um, when I first learned NVC or nonviolent communication, one of the things that I was told about it, which I really appreciated, is you can learn all these like ways of speaking to someone, and the other person doesn't actually have to learn it to be able to engage with you. This is a way of just better listening to other people and expressing yourself that might help in your communication. And I think the same does actually go with circling. And my hope is that as you're practicing circling, that it's giving you, it's strengthening your capacities and your relational skills, such that when you show up with anyone, romantic partner or person on the street, even, that it helps in some way to bring a little more contact, a little more connection, a little more sense of possibility, a little less getting stuck. So you can certainly bring your capacities and your skills to anyone in your life. Um, so that in and of itself, and you don't really need, I'll be careful about this. I was going to say you don't really need consent to communicate with someone. Um, there are times when people understand circling to mean asking someone a lot of probing questions. Um, and sometimes that's actually really unwelcome. And so to be, first of all, I don't think that's what circling is. However, in my own circling, it's a facet of circling is asking a lot of questions, and in my own circling, I can be really incisive with my questions. But it's important. I suppose what I'll say is that it's important that as I'm bringing myself to make contact with someone, whether I'm revealing myself or whether I'm asking questions, or just sitting there awkwardly in silence with them, that I am paying attention to how it's being received. And I'm interested in how it's being received. Like, circling is not just unloading things on people or interrogating people with your probing questions. So one is to bring some attunement, some interest in how it's being received, some sense of like, does this person seem receptive to what I'm bringing to them? You could even ask them, I have to share this thing. I want to share this thing. Are you open to hearing it right now? Or I want to ask you more about that. Are you open to being uh, to me asking some deeper questions about that? You can ask that kind of thing. But it's just important that you are. I believe it's important that you're attuning to the other person. Now, when I say, now coming back to this idea of like they have to want to do it. If you want this person to learn some circling skills or build some capacities, or if you want them to take a training program or do circling practices with you, like absolutely they need to want to do it, and you would probably want to get some buy-in, some consent from them in that process. And if they're not interested, if you offer it to them and they decline, and maybe you offer it to them again a little bit later and they decline, or you offer them something else and they decline, you can't control the other person. And You can express the impact that it has on you, um, but don't expect that this other person should change. Just because it's something that's important to you doesn't mean that it's going to be important to them. They may change their mind, they may not. But part of circling is a practice of surrender. It's letting go of what we cannot control and letting go of trying to make things turn out a certain way when that might not actually be the most natural way for things to go. But assuming that, if you're in a romantic relationship, that your partner is interested or curious or open to at least trying it out, I would suggest, starting with something like the noticing game, or doing some other authentic relating games, connection games. Maybe you live in a part of the world where there is a community where you can attend one of these authentic relating events, or even a circling event with this person. Right now in a lot of people are in lockdown, and a lot of events are happening online. There are online platforms that do authentic relating and circling that you can introduce these people to if you want to try that. I would venture towards just like one step at a time. Like first just trying the noticing game with someone, or even just something like curiosity. Hey, do you want, and starting with something like, hey, do you want to play a game? And just seeing how it goes. And if it goes well, try introducing another step or doing it again. Or, hey, that we've done this authentic relating thing, you want to try circling, and, go to someone else's event that someone else is facilitating if you can. If not, if you are trained, and if you feel comfortable enough, you can try circling this person if they are open to it, having a timer. I would say, especially when it comes to formal practice, set your bar low. I find that I was in a relationship with someone where there was a lot of circling happening, and I know a lot of people who are in intimate relationships and they're good with circling, and our intimate relationships can bring up a lot of our deepest wounds, our attachment patterns, a lot of places getting triggered, a lot of places where we're not able to be as open and as present and as resourceful as we may be with people who we're not as close with, strangely. So sure, like treat it as an experiment. Maybe circle them for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes and see how it goes. And then take some time to debrief afterwards. Have a conversation with them. How'd they like it? And maybe they love it and they want to go deeper. And there are avenues to go deeper. You can do more intense sessions. You can go to more events. And this person may find it of their own volition to do a training course. But just be careful about pressuring this person into doing something that they don't want to do. Because that is not really in line with circling principle of acceptance of some people call it welcome everything. I call it radical acceptance in my model of just really extending regard and allowing people to have their experience and allowing people to make their own decisions, and trusting the validity of someone having an experience that's different from yours. Now, another thing I want to say about the sort of like what I have more to say about bringing circling into relationships is more words of warning. I should acknowledge that I think there is a lot of value that circling skills can bring into a relationship, especially if both people are interested in communicating in a more truthful, connected way like that. I think it can bring a lot of value. So definitely, if it is an option for you, and the other person is interested in, totally go for it. But I'm just from having some bad experiences myself in previous relationship. I just want to offer, come in with, don't hold the bar too high. Notice if you're holding expectations of this person should be interested in this person should want to do this person should bring curiosity to me, this person should bring non-judgment to me. And bring in a little bit of humility and humanity as you're relating with someone that you're so close to. Something that Guy Sangstock, one of the originators of circling, has said, which kind of changed my thinking a couple of years ago, he was talking about the nature of curiosity, and he said something along the lines of like, I don't really know what curiosity is, but I recognize that it tends to be the very first thing to go when I'm triggered fighting with my partner. And I couldn't agree more. In my last big relationship, those times when we really got into it, when I was triggered or she was triggered, my curiosity was gone, and it took some restraint, even just to like not blurt out something really mean sometimes. And sometimes what's best is to actually be like, hey, I'm overwhelmed right now. I need 10 minutes. I need an hour. I need a day. I'm going to come back. I think that's important. That's a tip I got from, who was it? The Goodman Gottman Institute. Tell them that you're going to come back. That's just an attachment thing. Let's talk about this when we're more present. If you're triggered, circling is pretty much off the table. Don't try and force your way through it. I think circling is all about getting more present with one another from a place of openness. And there's a way in which circling helps us become more open. And so if you're not fully just like hyper dysregulated and triggered and hating the other person, if you're not at that point yet, maybe some circling, some curiosity instead of judgment, or some honesty early on might help create more openness and connection. But if you're past a certain threshold, going through the motions and gritting your teeth sometimes will just be frustrating. So bring yourself a lot of compassion. Look into things like attachment theory. There's a lot of really good books on attachment, a lot of really good resources, and just understanding what happens to the brain, understanding things like the window of tolerance when it comes to nervous system regulation, which I'm not going to say a lot about right now. But just having a lot of compassion for the human condition, especially in relationship with other people. It seems to be a phenomenon that we tend to be drawn to the people who are most familiar to us, and often what's most familiar to us are the disrupted attachment patterns that we had with our caregivers when we were growing up. So we'll find people who are just like our father, just like our mother, or other caretaker, and we'll try and this is just a theory, but we'll try and sort of repeat the pattern with a new person to try and resolve it, and often that just ends in frustration. So having outside resource, having outside help, which is one reason why I suggest going to someone else's circling event instead of trying to circle someone yourself. Having therapy, couples therapy, all that stuff. So yeah, don't set the bar too high. Be realistic, be humble, be kind to yourself, be kind to the other person. They might be dysregulated and not able to hold curiosity for you. And then I think the last word of warning about bringing circling into relationship comes back to this thing around non-judgment and acceptance, and really extending regard and welcoming the other person as they are. For some people at some times, and I was in this camp, especially if you have low self-esteem, that can be a recipe for getting into sort of a destructive pattern with another person. They call this a codependent narcissistic pattern. I don't know too much about that particular framework or theory, but if the other person is treating you poorly, saying mean things to you or having unreasonable expectations of you, what might be most appropriate is a boundary. But if you're coming from a place of, they're in pain and they're doing the best that they can, so I should just tough it out with them and struggle and let myself get overwhelmed and try and please them, like the principle of radical acceptance, which I think overall is a really good thing. And all those statements are sort of true in that, like, it's true that this person is probably coming from a lot of pain, like hurt people. I think that's important to acknowledge, to have empathy for our partners, but also to be radically accepting of ourselves and our own experience, including the places where we're getting overwhelmed or where we're past the threshold or where what's going on for whatever reason is just not okay with me. And to take some ownership around, not that what you're doing is not okay general and I'm some authority of the universe, but what you're doing is not okay for me right now, and setting some boundaries. Kendra Kunov, by the way, who was one of the early pioneers in circling, she does some excellent work on boundaries. Um, and one of the phrases I got from her is, in order to blank, I need you to blank. And it's a way of just sort of making like stating a boundary and stating what you need in order, in order for us to continue this conversation, I need you to take some deep breaths with me, or I need you to stop telling me what you think I'm experiencing and be more curious about my experience, or something like that. So that can be a trap around radical acceptance. I'm not saying radical acceptance is wrong. What I'm saying is that I think it's sometimes misunderstood, and that when we're triggered or in our coping patterns, it can get used by our coping patterns as a way to stay stuck. As a way, so these are survival patterns, but, as a way to reenact old stuff and just stay in our sort of destructive loops. Pleasing the other person, or putting letting ourselves be sort of taken advantage of, or walked over, or treated in ways that don't work for us, or are actually not life-giving, or causing us harm. So with that, all my warnings about bringing circling into relationship, I think if you keep those things in mind, what I just wanted to complete the thought of, the radical acceptance is valid, but it gets misunderstood. But the validity is like, if you're radically accepting yourself and the other person, and radically prioritizing those places where something is no longer working for you, and allowing yourself to, I can accept you and also have this not work for me. I can accept you and go away and come back later. I can accept you and ask for something different. Radical acceptance does not mean that you're not closed to things changing or working in a different way. So with all those warnings, I think circling is wonderful. I think, if nothing else, you just doing your own work, coming to the circling gym, so to speak, and practicing, building your own muscles of being able to stay present in intensity, being able to stay present with yourself, being able to make contact with other people, being able to really take more ownership for your experience, radically accept and surrender and all that stuff is so powerful and can make such a difference in your relationship. And then if your partner is open to it, awesome. So much the better. But do it with some humility, do it with a low bar, do it with some compassion for yourself and the other. So that's all I have to say about that. This was a longer than normal video. Let me know if this was helpful. I would love your comments. And if you have a circling related question that you want me to attempt to answer in a video, I would love to hear it. You can share that in the comments, or send me a message or an email, josh@circlingwizardry.com. Would love to hear from you. Okay, that's it. Until next time, ciao.